Welcome back to Mission of the Chosen. Today's message is raw, direct, and meant for you because silence wasn't weakness, it was the storm you carried, and that storm just arrived. Let's get real. Some of you mentioned oversubscription, that the alerts don't always land. That's okay. If you're meant to be here, the universe will bring you. And now that you're here, lean in. They mistook your quiet for surrender. They mocked your patience, thinking it meant you had no fight left. But what they didn't see was that every quiet moment was preparation. Every unanswered insult was evidence. Every calm step forward was weight gathering behind your next move. Picture this: a lion crouched in tall grass. It doesn't roar before the strike. It waits. Its silence is camouflage, not defeat. That was you. You didn't lose energy trying to shout them down. You let your stillness become the most dangerous weapon in the room. Your enemies underestimated you because they confuse noise with power. They think dominance is shouting, flexing, showing off. But the truth? The loudest one is usually the weakest. And when you finally did move, it wasn't with rage, it was with precision. Precision cuts deeper than any scream. Science even backs this up. Studies in psychology show silence creates more anxiety in aggressors than confrontation ever could. That's why they couldn't sleep. That's why they replayed every word in their heads at 2 a.m. Your silence forced them to hear themselves, and that sound was unbearable. You let them believe they had the upper hand, but really you were building the case. Think of a courtroom. The prosecution doesn't interrupt every lie. It stacks facts quietly until Judgment Day comes, and then it all lands at once. That's exactly what happened. Your quiet was the file cabinet, and now the drawers open, exposing every single one of their schemes. And now look at them. They're restless, scrambling for excuses, whispering behind doors, pulling strings in the dark. They're terrified not of what you did, but of who you've become. Because you've proven something they never wanted revealed. Patience is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. Calm is not defeat. When you showed up, it wasn't just to defend yourself. It was to expose them. And the moment you did, the energy flipped. Their smirks cracked, their false confidence burned off like fog in sunlight. Because truth is heavier than any performance, and when it hit the air, their whole theater collapsed. So now you stand here, proof that silence carries power they never understood. Proof that you don't need noise to win. Proof that strategy whispers until it thunders. And here's the part they'll never say out loud. They regret underestimating you. They wish they hadn't confused stillness with fragility, because now, every time they hear your name, they'll remember the silence that became their sentence. You didn't roar, and still the ground shook. That's the kind of power they'll never recover from. They thought you were blind. They assumed you'd stumble through life forever, too naive to see the traps, too uneducated to decode the language they buried in fine print, too distracted to catch the patterns they repeated. To them, your silence was ignorance. But in reality, your silence was school. Every trick they pulled became your textbook. Every lie became a highlighted line. Every betrayal, every backroom deal, every document buried under jargon, all of it fed your education. You didn't need permission to learn. You didn't need their approval. You absorbed it all, patiently, like a storm gathering charge far off on the horizon. Imagine a magician dazzling the crowd. The audience gasps as coins vanish and cards appear, but you stop clapping. You start watching. You notice the flick of the wrist, the hidden pocket, the distraction, and the second you see the trick, the magician's power collapses. That's what you did. Their illusions only worked on those too busy applauding. You weren't applauding, you were decoding, and now they're choking on the irony, because the very laws, loopholes, and systems they built to protect themselves became the scaffolding of their exposure. You learned their rules better than the architects who wrote them. You turned their game into a map, their maze into a straight road. While they mocked your patience, you became fluent in their language, and fluency is lethal. Think of a chess match. They let you sit at the board, making grand gestures with pawns and knights, assuming you didn't even know the rules. In silence, you memorized the patterns, calculated 3 steps ahead, and then, without warning, you checkmated them in a game they thought you weren't even playing. Their arrogance wrote the script. Your patience rewrote it. You didn't need to fight dirty. You didn't need noise. You needed time. Time to understand, time to prepare, time to master. And by the time you struck, You weren't striking out of anger, you were executing with precision. Rage can be managed. Precision can't. That's why they're panicking now. They don't know how much you know, and that uncertainty is eating them alive. Here's the hard truth. The traps they built for you became their own training ground. Every insult trained your intuition. Every lie sharpened your eyes. Every rule they weaponized turned into a blade in your hand. They built you into the strategist they can't defeat. And now they're exposed. Their fortress wasn't impenetrable. You walked right through the cracks they left in their own design. They can't undo what you've learned, and they can't survive what you've become. They forged a maze to keep you lost. You turned it into a map that led straight to their downfall. They walked into the courtroom with smirks, rehearsed lines, and the arrogance of people convinced they'd already won. To them, it wasn't a trial, it was a performance. They thought you would crumble under the weight of their noise, that their confidence alone would crush you. But the second you opened your mouth, everything shifted. The air in the room bent in your direction, because truth has a frequency no performance can drown out. It was never about how loud you could be. It was about how heavy your words were. Lies are light. They float until pierced. Truth drops like stone, and when it lands, it changes the ground beneath everyone standing there. That's what happened when you finally spoke. Your silence leading up to that day wasn't weakness, it was fuel. Every quiet moment turned into weight behind your words, and when they landed like thunder. Picture a predator strutting into a forest, chest puffed, teeth bared, certain it owns the territory. But then the wind changes, the shadows shift, and the predator realizes too late it has wandered into ground it doesn't control. That was them. They thought the courtroom was their stage, but it turned into your battlefield. Their lies cracked under the heat of your presence. Their confidence slipped into nervous twitches, dry mouths, and eyes darting to the floor. Psychology calls it micro-expressions, those tiny flashes of fear and shame that no rehearsal can hide. They practiced their lines, but their own bodies betrayed them, and you didn't even have to fight dirty. All you had to do was stand steady, let truth do the cutting, and watch as their theater fell apart. This is what people don't understand about power. It's not in the volume of your voice. It's not in the number of allies you can summon to clap on command. Real power is the ability to step into a room where the odds look stacked against you and turn the air electric just by existing in your truth. Think of historical moments. Galileo stood before a system that branded him a heretic, yet his truth outlasted centuries of mockery. Athletes were banned for being too good, as if excellence itself was unfair. Artists censored because their voices struck too deep. The pattern is always the same. Real power forces false systems to collapse. That's what happened with you. Your presence cracked a facade they thought would last forever. And here's the irony. You didn't even need to fight them blow for blow. You didn't need revenge. You didn't chase them down. You stood, you spoke, and the weight of truth did what no weapon could. Rage would have played into their story. Precision rewrote it. What made it cut deeper is that you weren't just defending yourself, you were exposing them. Suddenly, they weren't the accusers anymore. They were the ones on trial, stripped bare by the very words they thought would bury you. The judge didn't have to shout. The room didn't need noise. The energy alone told everyone in attendance who was standing on solid ground and who was sinking in quicksand. And the verdict, whatever form it took in your story, the promotion, the cleared name, the win, the vindication, was more than a personal victory. It was a cosmic declaration. The gavel struck, and the echo wasn't just for that room. It rippled outward. Friends, families, communities, even strangers who thought truth could never stand against manipulation suddenly felt the tremor. When the gavel falls, it doesn't just hit wood. It hits reputations. It hits alliances. It hits the false stability of every coward who clung to the illusion that lies would always win. Your victory didn't stay locked in that space. It became a storm breaking into every corner where people once doubted you. The rats jumped ship instantly. The same voices that whispered against you went silent overnight, afraid of being caught beside a sinking empire. That's how fragile loyalty built on lies really is. They pretended to be allies, but your win proved their loyalty was convenience, nothing more. And now they carry the stain of silence, because when truth rose, they stayed seated. The shift isn't just external. Inside you, something permanent changed too. You realized you didn't need to be the loudest. You didn't need revenge to prove your worth. The greatest power is calm. The greatest weapon is precision. The greatest victory is silence transformed into thunder at the exact right moment. This is why your story matters. It's not just about one case, one battle, one win. It's proof that truth doesn't fade under pressure. It sharpens. It waits. And when the time comes, it cuts through noise like lightning slicing the night sky. And now your enemies know this truth, even if they'll never admit it. Their confidence was paper thin, their alliances were hollow, and their empire was built on dust. You didn't just win. You exposed the blueprint of how their power collapses the second someone refuses to play by their script. The gavel fell, but that wasn't the end. That was the beginning of a new narrative, the one they swore would never exist, the one they thought they'd erased before it even began. You became the evidence no one can deny, the living proof that silence and patience can shatter the strongest illusion. And as they sit now in the ruins of their own performance, you stand with a calm they'll never touch, because truth doesn't need applause, it only needs time, and your time has already arrived. The moment you spoke, their empire cracked, not because you shouted, but because your truth was heavier than their entire performance. The strike of the gavel didn't just close a case, it shook foundations. One sound, one moment, and everything they thought was secure began to splinter. That's the thing about justice. It doesn't whisper. It roars in ways no one can ignore. Your wind spread like thunder across every circle that once doubted you. Families felt it, friendships shifted, whole communities had to face truths they'd buried. The ones who once laughed quietly at your struggle couldn't laugh anymore. They were forced to face themselves, forced to confront that, when it mattered most, they chose comfort over courage. It's brutal, but true. Victories don't just reveal enemies, they reveal the silence of so-called friends, and silence in the face of injustice is remembered just as loudly as betrayal. When the gavel fell, it cast a spotlight not only on those who attacked you, but also on those who stayed still, who pretended not to see, who hid behind the excuse of neutrality. Your victory forced every mask to slide off. Imagine a ship everyone swore was unsinkable. For years, people boarded it with blind trust, convinced it could weather any storm. But the moment it hit the iceberg, the truth was undeniable. And what happens first? The rats scramble, the allies vanish, the supposed leaders panic. That's exactly what your enemy's supporters did when the universe declared you the victor. It's almost comical to watch. Those who mocked you are now scrambling to rewrite history, suddenly claiming they always believed in you, that they always saw your potential. But the record doesn't lie. The truth of where they stood is etched in memory. No amount of pretending can scrub away the silence or the smirks that marked them when you were under fire. This is the hidden gift inside your victory. It not only cleared your name, it cleansed your circle. It drew a line between the genuine and the counterfeit. It showed you who never deserved access to your table. And that clarity, that painful but necessary clarity, is priceless. Understand this. Your win was never just yours. It became a mirror for everyone around you. Some saw their reflection and felt pride because they stood with you when it wasn't easy. Others saw shame because they betrayed themselves when they betrayed you. And that mirror doesn't fade, it stays. Think about how far this ripple reaches. It's not just in your own life. It's in the lives of strangers who watched from the shadows, unsure if truth could ever prevail. Your win told them it can. That even when the odds seem stacked, when the lies seem louder, when the enemies look bigger, the universe still bends toward balance. The people who once thought manipulation always triumphed are reconsidering. The ones who believed lies had more power than silence are reevaluating. And the ones who thought you were finished now have to live with the proof that you weren't just still standing, you were crowned. The real earthquake isn't that you won. The real earthquake is that your win changed the entire script for everyone watching. Suddenly, the bullies don't look invincible anymore. Suddenly, the loudest voices don't look untouchable. And suddenly, silence doesn't look like weakness, it looks like strategy. Your victory became the new standard. And with that, the balance of power shifted. Because once one person breaks through, the illusion that no one can collapses forever. You didn't just close a chapter, you opened a floodgate. Others will follow your path, using the proof of your story as courage for their own. That's the real power of this moment. It didn't stay locked inside your hands. It spilled into the lives of countless others. You won more than your case. You redefined what's possible. And the ones who underestimated you, they'll never recover from the fact that what they thought was your ending became the beginning of their unraveling. You were never the weak link. You were always the storm waiting to break. And when it finally hit, it didn't just end their game, it changed the whole atmosphere. They thought your silence was surrender. They mocked you, spread rumors, built stories out of thin air. Every whisper, every sly comment was meant to convince the world that you were finished. What they didn't realize was that silence isn't emptiness, it's pressure building. Silence is the sound of a loaded weapon before it fires. It's the click no one hears until the bullet's already left the chamber. That's what you carried. While they wasted their energy performing, you conserved yours. While they danced in the spotlight, you were sharpening in the dark. Imagine a hunter stomping through a forest, laughing because the woods are quiet. He believes silence means safety. But just beyond his sight, crouched in the tall grass, waits a predator still, patient, focused. That predator doesn't need to make noise. Its presence is enough. And when it strikes, the hunter never sees it coming. That predator is you. Your silence was camouflage. It was patience disguised as defeat. And when you finally chose to speak, to act, the power hit like thunder after a long drought. They weren't ready for it because they couldn't imagine silence being that dangerous. Psychology has a term for this. Studies show that silence in the face of provocation creates deep anxiety in liars and manipulators. They thrive on noise arguments, chaos, shouting matches. It gives them a stage. But when you didn't feed them, when you sat calm, when you let them keep talking, they dug their own graves with every word. They revealed themselves more clearly than you ever could have. That's why silence is not weakness. It's a mirror. It forces the guilty to stare at themselves until the cracks show, and while they were unraveling, you were steady. That's what broke them. Think of it. Every scheme they built, every rumor they spread, every attack they launched, it all piled up as evidence. You didn't erase it, you archived it. You didn't fight them in the mud. You let them expose themselves. And when the time came, you didn't need to scream. You just needed to reveal what was already there. They mistook your restraint for fragility. But what you were really doing was protecting your energy. You weren't broken, you were unbothered. And that's why when you finally moved, the impact was devastating. Now they replay every moment, every conversation, every jab they thought was harmless. They wish they hadn't underestimated you. They wish they hadn't mistaken your patience for surrender, but it's too late. The storm already broke, and they're standing in the wreckage. And here's the truth they'll never admit. The quietest person in the room often becomes the loudest chapter in the story. You proved that. You showed the world that silence doesn't mean absent. It means observing, preparing, reloading. Your silence became their sentence, and the irony is, they wrote it themselves. They thought silence was your coffin, but it was your cocoon, and when you emerged, they couldn't recognize the force you had become. Every injustice they threw your way wasn't forgotten, it was recorded. Every insult, every betrayal, every time they tried to strip you of dignity, all of it went into a ledger the universe keeps. They thought it disappeared. They thought they'd gotten away with it. But the truth is, the universe never forgets. Karma isn't a fairy tale. It's accounting. And when the books are balanced, the debt is collected not just in full, but with interest. Picture a thief sneaking into a vault every night, taking what doesn't belong to him. He laughs, thinking no one is watching. He gets bold, careless. Then one morning, the doors slam, alarms scream, and the accountant is standing there with every number tallied. That's what happened to them. What they thought was hidden was actually stacking debt against their own future. Your patience wasn't weakness, it was credit. Your kindness wasn't stupidity, it was patience banking up. They mistook mercy for ignorance. They mistook forgiveness for fragility. But mercy is never free. Forgiveness always carries an invoice. And when the day comes, the collection is brutal. That's what your victory was, the universe cashing in every wound they gave you. And the payment wasn't subtle, it was multiplied. Every sleepless night, every tear, every lonely hour you endured turned into interest, paid back in a way they can't undo. They thought their cruelty vanished into the air, but cruelty doesn't vanish, it accrues. And when the bill arrives, it demands everything. Your win wasn't random, it wasn't luck. It was cosmic balance arriving on time, ruthless in its precision. The debt has been paid, and they paid it with their own collapse. They thought you'd drown under the weight of what they did to you. Instead, it became the weight that crushed them. You walked away with profit, they're left bankrupt, and that's how the universe keeps its books. The day you won, the old rules died. Everything they depended on, fear, intimidation, manipulation, lost its grip in an instant. What used to keep people silent suddenly had no effect. What once looked untouchable now looked fragile. Before your victory, the world around you carried an unspoken law. The liar who shouts the loudest wins. People believed it, families believed it, communities lived under it, and bullies strutted as if their tactics were permanent. But your win shattered that illusion. With one decisive strike, you rewrote the code. Silence proved sharper than shouting. Calm cut deeper than chaos. Preparation outlasted performance. That's the shift you forced into existence. Think of a crooked casino running for years. Every game rigged, every hand stacked, every player walking away believing the house always wins. Then one day, someone plays the same deck and leaves with the jackpot. Suddenly the myth collapses. Suddenly everyone sees the truth. That's what your story did. You didn't just win for yourself. You proved the system could be flipped. And that revelation terrifies manipulators everywhere, because now they hesitate. Now they second-guess themselves. Now every bully wonders if their next target will be another you, silent, patient, prepared, lethal in timing. Psychologists call this a pattern break. When one person proves the cycle isn't inevitable, it forces the whole group to reconsider what's possible. That's the ripple you created. Your victory didn't just close a case. It cracked open an entire culture of fear. People who once felt powerless now feel a spark. They look at you and think, if they could rise against all odds, then maybe I can too. That's the true scale of what you've done. You became evidence that intimidation collapses under clarity, that lies lose to patience, and that fear has an expiration date. Manipulators fear exposure more than failure, because once the curtain is torn, the whole act ends. And you tore the curtain. You didn't just survive, you set a new standard. And now the same people who once treated you as expendable are watching their own reflection in the mirror you left behind. They see that fear doesn't hold forever. They see that truth has teeth. And they know deep down, even if they never say it out loud, that their time is up. You walked away not just with victory, but with proof that justice no longer whispers, it roars. Your win didn't just end their game, it reset the rules for everyone still trapped inside it. Look at them now. Their voices are cracked with panic, their stories don't line up anymore, and every frantic whisper they spread only makes them look more desperate. Panic is not strength. Panic is the body's confession that it has lost control. That's why they can't sit still. That's why they keep repeating the same lines, hoping repetition will turn into truth. But the more they talk, the more the room feels the weight of their fear. This is the most undeniable proof of your victory, their panic. Not the paperwork, not the judgment, not even the announcement itself. It's their behavior in the aftermath, the late-night calls, the sleepless pacing, the nervous glances, the way they scramble to convince anyone who will listen that what you did couldn't possibly be real. That is the loudest evidence of all. They aren't crying foul because you cheated. They're crying foul because you crushed them so cleanly they can't process reality. Think about a gambler who cheats for years. He rigs every hand, stacks every deck, convinces himself that luck is always on his side. Then one night someone sits down across the table, plays the exact same cards, and wins fairly. The gambler flips the table, screaming that the game must be rigged, because in his mind, he can't lose unless someone else broke the rules. That's exactly what your enemies are doing now. Their panic is proof of their collapse. And here's the brutal truth. They were never strong. They were just loud. They were never untouchable. They were just surrounded by illusions. When those illusions cracked, when you showed what real power looks like, they lost the one thing that kept them standing, their myth. And without their myth, they're nothing but ordinary people exposed under a light they can't dim. Notice how quickly alliances fall apart in moments like this. People who once cheered them on, who once whispered lies against you, suddenly go quiet. The air shifts. No one wants to be caught standing next to someone sinking in their own lies. The same allies they depended on for applause now slip away into silence. That's what happens when panic spreads, it isolates. Your calm is the contrast that terrifies them. While they tremble, you are steady. While they scramble, you remain grounded. While they waste energy creating false narratives, you don't need to explain anything. Your win is already public, already undeniable, already permanent. Nothing they say can erase it. That's why they're unraveling. There's something psychology teaches us about this moment. Panic is the body's admission that the mind has lost control. It shows up in small ways, in rushed speech, in shaky hands, in inconsistent stories. No matter how well someone rehearses, panic forces the truth to leak out through every crack. That's what's happening to them now. Their own behavior has become the proof of your victory. And here's what makes this so important. You don't need to answer their panic. You don't need to defend yourself against their noise. Every time they open their mouths, they dig the hole deeper. Every new excuse becomes another contradiction. Every wild accusation makes them look weaker. They're not hurting you anymore. They're exposing themselves. This is why your story has such weight. It isn't just that you rose. It's that your rise forced your enemies into collapse without you even having to swing. You didn't push them over the edge. Your success revealed that they were already hanging there. All it took was one undeniable victory for them to fall apart in front of everyone. Imagine them now, pacing the floor in the middle of the night, checking their phones, worrying about what will be revealed next. Some are calling in favors. Some are hiding evidence. Some are preparing apologies they don't believe in, hoping to soften the blow of what's coming. But nothing changes the fact that their panic is public and your victory is permanent. It almost feels unfair, doesn't it? That you had to carry so much silence, endure so much doubt, while they strutted in confidence. But now the roles have reversed. You stand in calm certainty, while they drown in the same fear they once tried to bury you under. That's not unfairness, that's balance. And the beauty is, you didn't even need revenge. You didn't chase them down. You didn't waste energy plotting their downfall. You focused on your growth, your lane, your purpose. And that was enough to unravel their entire system. Your reflection alone was enough to crack their mirror. The panic they carry now will follow them for the rest of their lives. Every time your name comes up, their stomachs will turn. Every success you gain will burn them deeper. Every move forward you make will echo as a reminder of the day they lost everything. That's not just punishment. That's a sentence written by the universe itself. So when you see their frantic behavior, don't mistake it for power. It's weakness exposed. It's the evidence they can't hide. And every ounce of energy they waste in panic only proves the scale of your win. Your calm presence dismantled their chaos. Your patience destroyed their plans. And your silence turned into thunder they couldn't escape. They're left with nothing but panic. You're left with peace. And peace is the ultimate proof that you already won. First, they dragged your name like dirt across the floor. They turned you into the cautionary tale. You were the example parents whispered to their kids. See what happens when you step out of line. See what happens when you don't play by the rules. They made you the scapegoat, the warning sign, the story everyone repeated when they wanted to scare someone back into conformity. Your name was heavy then, not because of who you were, but because of the lies attached to it. They painted you as a failure, a fool, someone who tried and lost. That was the reputation they wanted you to carry forever. To them, you weren't meant to be remembered. You were meant to be erased. But look at how it flipped. The same name they laughed at is the name they can't ignore now. It carries a new weight, one they never intended. Fear, awe, and a grudging respect that slips out in whispers they don't want heard. This is the pattern history always follows. Every legend begins as a cautionary tale. Every person who outgrew the limits placed on them was first mocked, first doubted, first buried under ridicule. That's the price of walking a path they don't understand. And you walked it anyway. Imagine a stone kicked along a road, ignored by everyone, covered in dust, seen as useless. For years it's overlooked. But one day, someone lifts that stone and places it at the peak of a monument, and suddenly the world looks up in awe. That's your story. They treated you like rubble, but time revealed you were foundation. What makes them burn now isn't just that you rose, it's how you rose. You didn't claw back with noise. You didn't return insult for insult. You carried silence, patience, and precision. And that combination is sharper than any blade. That's why your name is no longer just known, it's studied. Legends aren't created by survival alone. They're carved by how survival happens. And the way you survived, steady, strategic, unwilling to lose yourself in the chaos, turned your reputation into something unshakable. People who've never met you now carry courage because of your story. They see proof that the underestimated can still rise, that the written off can still rewrite. And here's the irony. Those who once mocked you are now measuring themselves against you. The circles that once spat your name as an insult now whisper it as a warning. Don't underestimate them. Look what happened last time. You've become the marker by which others test their limits, the shadow that intimidates those who thought intimidation was their weapon. Understand this. Your enemies don't just hate that you won. They hate that you've become unforgettable. They wanted you erased, but instead you became engraved. Their lies faded like smoke, but your truth turned to stone. And stone doesn't vanish, it stands. There's a shift that happens when you cross this threshold. You stop living for survival and start living as symbol. You're not just a person who endured injustice. You're proof that injustice can't outlast endurance. That betrayal can't erase integrity. That lies may run fast, but truth walks steady, and steady always wins the marathon. Think of the people watching you now, strangers, survivors, those who thought they'd never get up again. They hear your story and realize the script they were handed isn't permanent. They see you, and they whisper to themselves, if they could rise after that, what excuse do I have? That's the spark you've become. And your enemies? They have to live with this. The very person they branded as a failure is now the blueprint others study to find their own strength. They tried to make you the story that died in silence. Instead, you became the story that outlived their lies. You were never the cautionary tale. You were the legend waiting to be written. And now, every time they speak your name, they're forced to admit, even in their silence, that you've become everything they swore you'd never be. Every toxic system needs a scapegoat, someone to carry the shame, the weight, the blame that nobody else wants to face. That was you. In the family, in the circle, in the community, you were the one chosen to wear the label, the black sheep, the problem, the one they pointed at whenever something went wrong. But here's what they never wanted you to know. Scapegoats aren't chosen because they're weak. They're chosen because they're strong. Because they're sensitive enough to feel what others bury, honest enough to speak truths others choke on, stubborn enough to resist the illusions everyone else swallows. Your very refusal to bend made you the target. It's easier to blame the mirror than face the reflection. That's what they did to you. Imagine a cracked mirror hanging on a wall. The family looks at it, sees their distorted faces, and instead of admitting the distortion is their own, they curse the mirror. They say the mirror is broken, that the mirror is cursed. They blame the object instead of themselves. That mirror was you. You showed them what they didn't want to face. They projected every wound, every secret, every generational curse onto your back. They piled their dysfunction on you and laughed when you struggled to carry it. But here's the twist. You didn't break under the weight. You grew stronger. And one day you realized the truth. The scapegoat was never the curse. The scapegoat was the cure. Your refusal to stay silent exposed everything. By refusing to accept the role they wrote for you, you shattered the mythology. The so-called problem was actually the solution. The one they cast aside as liability was the only one strong enough to say, this ends here. Psychology has studied this. Children who grow up scapegoated in toxic families often become cycle breakers. They don't repeat the dysfunction. They don't pass down the lies. They become the one who stops the pattern. And that's what you've done. You ended the story they wanted to recycle. You refused to pass the curse to the next generation. Think about how radical that is. Whole bloodlines can live inside denial for centuries, handing pain down like an heirloom, until one person says no. That person is you. You chose truth over tradition, clarity over comfort, freedom over familiarity. And when you did, the whole foundation cracked. That's why they fought you so hard. Not because you were weak, but because you were too strong. Not because you were cursed, but because you were capable of breaking the curse. You became the threat to everything they built on lies. And deep down, they knew it. Now, Generations ahead will live lighter because of you. Children you'll never meet will breathe freer because you shattered chains they didn't even know existed. You changed the inheritance. You rewrote the legacy. They called you the black sheep. But in truth, you were the white knight hiding in plain sight. The very role they mocked became the role that liberated everyone. And though they'll never admit it out loud, they'll carry the memory of the one they tried to bury who became the one who set everyone free. You were never the curse, you were the cure. Every weapon they forged against you became the very tool that destroyed them. That's the irony they'll never say out loud. They thought they were breaking you, but in reality, they were sharpening you. When they lied, you learned to treasure truth. When they manipulated, you trained your eyes to spot deceit faster than anyone else. When they used threats and systems to scare you, you studied their playbook until you knew it better than they did. Every wound became a lesson. Every betrayal became data. Every attempt to bury you became training in disguise. Imagine a blacksmith hammering steel. Each strike looks violent, like destruction. Sparks fly, the metal bends under heat and pressure. But the process isn't breaking the steel, it's making it unbreakable. That's what happened with you. Their fire didn't destroy you, it tempered you. It turned you into a blade they couldn't dull. The most dangerous people in the world aren't those who've never been hurt. They're the ones who've been hurt deeply and turned the pain into precision. That's you. You don't just see through lies now, you smell them before they're even spoken. You don't just endure betrayal, you catalog it, analyze it, and file it away as evidence for later. You don't just face manipulation, you dismantle it in silence while the manipulator thinks they're still in control. Science even confirms this transformation. Studies on survivors of chronic manipulation show they develop heightened intuition, a sharper instinct for dishonesty, an almost supernatural ability to detect red flags. What they meant as destruction became your advantage. They trained you into the strategist who could dismantle them without effort. Think of it this way. They thought they were writing your obituary. In reality, they were writing their own. Because every time they mocked you, they gave you a case study. Every time they tricked you, they gave you a blueprint. Every time they tried to block you, they gave you a map of their own weak points. By the time you struck back, you weren't guessing, you weren't improvising, you were executing with precision they couldn't dream of. They thought they were unpredictable, but you had studied every move until their playbook was burned into your memory, and when you finally turned their own weapons against them, it wasn't revenge, it was inevitable. Picture this, a fortress built to be impenetrable. The architects laugh at anyone who dares approach. But one quiet observer studies the blueprints they leave lying around, memorizing the cracks, the blind spots, the exits. Then one day, that observer walks straight through the walls without resistance. That's you. You didn't need to fight at the gates. You knew where the fortress collapsed from the inside. That's why your victory feels so unfair to them, because they can't admit the truth. They trained you. They created the very warrior who destroyed them. The lies they used to discredit you became the fuel for your truth. The manipulation they thought would trap you became the key that unlocked their own downfall. And now they live with that reality. Every time they see you, they see the evidence of their own mistakes. Every scar they gave you became armor. Every wound they inflicted became wisdom. Every trap they set became training for a battle they were destined to lose. They tried to make you a victim. Instead, they manufactured a strategist. And that strategist buried them with the very weapons they once aimed at you. Their fire didn't consume you, it forged you, and the steel you've become will outlast their ashes. The real victory wasn't the gavel, the paperwork, or the announcement that proved you right. The real victory was freedom, the kind you feel in your chest when their opinion no longer matters, when their voices can't reach you, when their names carry no weight. That is the win they'll never understand. They're still trapped, still circling the same four walls of lies, gossip, and manipulation, convinced that cage is the whole world. They wake up thinking about the next scheme, the next rumor, the next way to pull strings in the dark. But you walked out of that prison. You found the key they never wanted you to find. And once you stepped outside, you realized the horizon was wider than you ever imagined. Imagine prisoners fighting over shadows on the wall, arguing about which shadow is real, which shadow is bigger. That's them. You no longer live there. You no longer waste breath proving yourself to people who can't see past the chains they wear proudly. You don't beg narcissists for empathy. You don't seek validation from those who never had the capacity to give it. That's the power they can't take from you. And the truth is, they hate this part the most. They could tolerate your success if it still revolved around them. They could stomach your rise if they still had a say in it. But the fact that you no longer think about them, no longer ask about them, no longer give them space in your mind, that's what breaks them. Freedom is the greatest cut. You didn't just survive what they did, you outgrew it. You left their entire system behind. They're still playing rigged checkers in the corner, while you've moved on to skies they can't reach. Science has a word for this too: detachment. Studies show that the deepest healing doesn't come from revenge but from disconnection. When the wound no longer defines you, when the scar no longer carries weight, you've already won, and you've reached that place. You are no longer defined by the pain they gave you. You carry peace now. They thought you would circle their orbit forever. They thought you'd keep chasing their approval, trying to prove you were worthy. Instead, you built a world without them. A life that doesn't acknowledge their noise. That's the kind of victory that keeps echoing long after the headlines fade. And here's the cruelest cut of all: they will spend the rest of their lives inside the prison they built, scratching at the walls, screaming for attention, fighting over shadows. While you breathe in air they'll never touch. They can't follow you here. They can't drag you back. They can't control a story you've already outgrown. They thought they caged you, but really, you caged them. And you walked out free. Some victories end when the gavel falls. Yours didn't. Yours began there, because what happened next was bigger than any courtroom, bigger than any circle of enemies, bigger even than your own name. Your win became a story. Not the kind of story they wanted to spread, not the cautionary tale meant to scare people silent, but the story they can't erase. A living legend that moves from mouth to mouth, room to room, generation to generation. People you've never met repeat your name. Survivors whisper about you in places where hope feels fragile. Communities pass your story like a lantern, proof that the universe doesn't forget, that justice might take its time, but it always arrives. You became the evidence that silence is not defeat, that patience is not weakness, that truth, even when buried, eventually cracks the ground wide open. Imagine a cave swallowed in pitch black. People huddle, believing there's no way out, no light, no rescue. Then one spark appears. At first it looks small, fragile, almost laughable against the vast darkness. But as eyes adjust, that tiny spark becomes the guide that leads them out. That spark is your story. And once it was lit, the darkness never had the same power again. Your enemies thought they wrote the ending. They thought they sealed your fate in ridicule, in whispers, in silence. But the moment you won, their script burned to ash. Because your story didn't die, it grew. And the more they tried to bury it, the louder it became. This is why they're restless. It's not just that you rose, it's that your rise has turned into a symbol. And symbols outlive lies. Lies fade. Symbols endure. Sociologists even study this ripple effect. When one person breaks through injustice, when one soul proves the impossible is possible, entire groups shift. Suddenly, people who were silent find their voices. People who thought they were powerless stand taller. That's what your victory did. It didn't just change your life. It changed the air for everyone who watched. And here's the deepest irony. They tried to smear your name until it disappeared. But the smear became the reason your name is remembered. They tried to bury you in silence. But silence became your strategy, and then your thunder. They thought they could make you the footnote to their empire, but you became the headline they'll never outrun. Even if they never speak it, even if they try to rewrite history, even if they twist their tongues to downplay it, they know. They know they lost more than a battle. They lost control of the narrative. They lost ownership of the story, because now the story belongs to the truth. And the truth belongs to you. You didn't just win for yourself. You won for every underestimated soul, every scapegoat, every quiet one who was told their silence meant nothing. You became the living reminder that silence, when timed right, can change the world. Your enemies will fade. Their noise will be forgotten. But your story, your proof, will outlive every one of their lies. Because truth isn't fragile, it's eternal, and you've become its evidence. By now, they've run out of words. The smirks are gone, the confidence is drained, and what's left is the silence of people who finally realize they can't spin their way out of reality. That silence is more satisfying than any apology could ever be, because it isn't chosen, it's forced. They tried to bury you under noise, but noise fades. They tried to bury you under lies, but lies rot. They tried to bury you under silence, but silence in your hands became a weapon sharper than their words. What they didn't know is that every attempt to cover you only made the seed grow deeper roots. And now that you've risen, their tools don't work anymore. Think of an earthquake. Buildings designed to look powerful crumble, while the mountain steady, silent, patient, remains. That's you. They built their empire like glass towers, fragile and shiny, and you stood like stone. When the shaking came, the towers collapsed, but the mountain was still standing. Your enemies know now that they didn't just lose a fight, they lost the illusion of control. For years, fear kept them powerful. Fear silenced others. Fear kept truth hidden. But the second you broke through, the second you won in plain sight, the myth dissolved. And once the myth is gone, it can never return with the same strength. What you've done is irreversible. You've proven that the untouchable can be touched, that the invincible can bleed, that the liar who shouts loudest can still be silenced by undeniable proof. That lesson can't be unlearned by anyone who witnessed it. And that's why your enemies walk around restless, sleepless, and paranoid. They know your story is bigger than you now. It has spread beyond their reach. People they never wanted to inspire are whispering about you. People they never thought would question them are rethinking everything. They thought they buried you alone, but now they're haunted by the fact that you've multiplied into 1,000 sparks in the minds of strangers. And what terrifies them most is that they can't stop it. They can't sue it. They can't silence it. They can't erase it, because your story isn't contained in a document or a headline or a room. It's alive. It's breathing in the hearts of everyone who saw it, everyone who needed proof that truth can still win. That's the legacy you've stepped into. You're not just someone who endured and survived. You're the example, the proof, the blueprint, and that carries more weight than any enemy's accusations ever could. The same people who called you a liability now use your name as a warning. The same ones who mocked you now measure themselves against you. And the same ones who thought you were gone forever now whisper, wondering what you'll do next. They thought you'd disappear quietly. Instead, you became unforgettable, and the silence they once used to trap you has now become the silence that imprisons them. There's a point where victory stops being about winning and starts being about rewriting the whole story. That's where you are now. Your rise wasn't just a chapter that ended in triumph. It was a new beginning that forced everyone, friends, enemies, strangers, to see life through a different lens. The people who once said you'd never make it now walk with the weight of being proven wrong. And the irony is, their disbelief helped build your momentum. Their doubts became your fire. Their schemes became your training ground. And their silence, their laughter, their accusations, all of it turned into the very proof that patience was never weakness. It was preparation. They will tell the story differently now. They'll rewrite their memories, pretend they always supported you, act as if they saw your potential from the beginning. But history doesn't bend for convenience. The record is clear. The faces that mocked you are remembered. The ones who turned away are remembered. The silence of supposed allies is remembered. And the day you rose is remembered as the moment truth split illusion apart. You are the story they can't escape. Even when they try to bury it, it surfaces. Even when they try to twist it, the facts remain. Even when they pretend to forget, the echoes chase them. Your name is no longer the liability they once whispered, it's the headline they can't outrun. And now the legacy is larger than you, because you've proven something cosmic. Truth is patient, but it is not fragile. Lies run fast, but truth outlasts them. Silence may be mocked, but in the right hands, silence becomes thunder. And once thunder strikes, no one forgets the sound. This is why they call your win illegal, because to them, it shouldn't exist. It doesn't fit the script. It breaks the rules of their game. And when rules break, the whole game collapses. That's why they're restless, why they call for help, why they whisper in back rooms. They know the universe flipped the table, and you're the proof standing in front of everyone. So let this settle in your spirit. You didn't just win. You became living evidence. Evidence that no scheme, no betrayal, no manipulation, can erase the timing of the universe. Evidence that the quietest one in the room can rewrite the loudest script. Evidence that when the game is rigged, patience isn't defeat, it's the seed of an earthquake. And now you stand not just as a victor, but as a mirror for every underestimated soul, a mirror for every scapegoat, every survivor, every silent one who wondered if the universe ever kept score. When they see you, they know it does. This is more than closure. This is transformation. You didn't bury your enemies with rage. You buried them with proof. And proof is something they can never erase. They thought you were finished. But you didn't just survive, you outlasted. You didn't just rise, you redefined what rising looks like. And your story now belongs to eternity. Your victory isn't just yours. It's a lantern, a blueprint, a storm, and a legacy. And it will outlive every shadow they tried to trap you in. They will remember you not as the one they tried to erase, but as the one who turned their entire game into dust.